Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. So my name is Dr. Vera Hölscher. The thesis defense is, of course, scheduled to start at 1:30. So I would say let's stick quite strictly to the timing of this. But yes, welcome everyone already. Hello and a very good afternoon to everyone. We are here live on YouTube for the defense of Trinta Muriuki's MBA thesis at the European Business University of Luxembourg. As everyone here in the presence, so we've got, of course, the supervisor Inge Birkberg-Lassen, and then also the assessor Enrique Garcia Otero. Aware of this is a tremendous accomplishment that we would like to first of all commend Trinta on, to have submitted this MBA thesis. And today it is your chance to defend this thesis, Trinta. This is a proud, honorable moment, and we are looking forward to hearing what you have to say about your thesis. And what I will begin with is to just talk a little bit about the process that we're going to go through today. So I am the chair of the defense. To anyone who's just joining us now, my name is Dr. Vera Hölscher. I'm one of the adjunct members of faculty at the European Business University, and it is my honor and privilege today to maintain the decorum during this examination. This means that Trinta is given a fair and equitable assessment of her work. This examination, as you might understand from the context of us being live on YouTube, is of course public. This means that we also have a kind of certain decorum in place. So what we will begin with is actually a presentation of Trinta's work. So Trinta has, she has up to 20 minutes to do this, and I'm just going to change my own view here again. Yes, so I am personally a non-voting member of this committee, and it is going to be between Inge and Enrique to actually deliberate over the final exam mark. So what I first of all is that everyone has read Trinta's thesis. Is that correct? Can everyone confirm that? Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. I would also like to confirm with Trinta that she is indeed ready for this exam today, that she feels confidently prepared for this exam. Can I have you confirm this, Trinta? So
yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Then yes, so after this, after the Viva Voce, and during which you are going to get to talk about your work in your own voice, which must not exceed 20 minutes, there will be questions, and thereafter you are going to be sent into a breakout room while both your supervisor and the examiner deliberate about your mark, and you will then be invited back and hear about the outcome of this. So what is important is that according to the EBU guidelines, during this Viva Voce, during which you will have the opportunity to briefly present your master thesis, there's no presentation or projection material permitted. This is according to the guidelines. Is everyone actually okay with this? So this is the guidelines that I was actually given here. All right. So in that case, yes, can I ask you, Trinta, to start your Viva Voce about your work now?
Thank you, Vera. Thank you to the panel. Good evening, good afternoon to everybody who is with us this afternoon. I'll be running us through my research or the thesis defense presentation. My study was around the influence of COVID-19 strategic responses on organizational performance among internet service providers in Kenya. My supervisor and my chair and reader are all present here, and you can see their names. I quickly now move to the outline. So in the next couple of minutes, I'll be talking about the background of the study, the problem statement, the research aim and objectives, the theoretical framework, conceptual framework, the methodology that I used in this study, the findings, the conclusion, and lastly, the recommendations out of this study. So now I'll move to the background of the study, and I would like to start by saying that what motivated me to pick up this topic was the fact that there has been economic uncertainties due to COVID-19, which has highly impacted the organizational performance of most, if not all, the organizations across the globe. And this has not excluded the internet service providers in Kenya. Therefore, with these uncertainties and all the challenges and the shifts that have happened across the globe and affecting different businesses, there's need for strategic responses. Whereas there exists very many strategic responses that organizations could employ to ensure that they improve the organizational performance. This study will be focusing on three strategic responses, that is the financial restructuring, staff restructuring and training, and work from home strategies. When we talk about financial restructuring, we'll be looking at actions or some of the things that organizations will do to ensure that they are financially healthy to perform and to continue offering services and their products to their customers. Around staff restructuring, we look at actions or ways that organizations will take up to ensure that their staff remains motivated to continue.
I lost Trinta. I don't know about you guys.
I lost her as well.
As well, yeah.
She'll get back on in a little while.
Okay. What's the meaning of when we say that there shouldn't be any presentation or projection material is permitted?
Apologies, I just got thrown out, but I'm back.
Yeah, that's not supposed to be PowerPoint.
Should I buckle down on that harder? Basically, I mean, I
think. Given that she's already there, taking it away now it would be distracting for her.
Yeah, okay. I agree.
Fair enough. I mean, I did state that, but yes. Yeah. Okay, Trinta, take it away again. The floor is yours.
Apologies for that hitch. So I'll just run us through the background of the study so that we catch it from the beginning. And the motivation for me for this study was the fact that there has been economic uncertainties that have affected organizations across the globe. And this has not exempted the internet service providers. And with all of these shifts and changes, then there's need for strategic responses for organizations to continue remaining profitable and in operation. Whereas there are many strategic responses that could be employed, this study will be focusing on three main strategic responses, which are financial restructuring, staff restructuring, and training, and work from home strategies. When you talk about financial restructuring, you're looking for actions like debt financing or other actions that organizations would take to ensure that their financial health remains stable and one that can support the operations. Staff restructuring really is around how staff or the employees of any organization are kept motivated and enabled to continue to be productive all through. The work from home strategies really, this I must say has become more prevalent with the COVID-19 uncertainties. We have now people having flexible working hours and they work from whichever location that they are at. So that is the background. And now I will be looking at the problem statement. So with these uncertainties that come with the effects like those that we have seen with COVID-19, it is expected that organizations adopt strategic responses, and that those that adopt strategic responses perform better than those that do not. Now, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen a variation in organization performance again among the internet service providers, where some of them have either become profitable, others have really, gone down. So these effects were both positive and negative. Such variation in performance, and most specifically the negative variation, has an effect on the stakeholders, both internal and external. Some of these stakeholders include the government, and where you see negative variation in performance of these internet service providers, then you realize that the governments will start to struggle to receive tax from these organizations. We have seen regulatory bodies really struggle to carry on their mandate. Stakeholder value and how much the stakeholders are gaining from their investment has also been declining in some instances. Customers receiving substandard or no service at all due to some of these effects. We have seen suppliers are highly impacted by the fact that if the organizations are struggling, then the payment to suppliers and the other collaborative elements that enable the networks to perform are impacted. On the staff bit, we have seen very many people lose their jobs, or you have job cuts, and this has had a lot of impact on the staff. This area deserves academic study. And the reason I say this is because out of my literature review, I realized that this topic is really widely researched, but there was no focus on internet service providers. And that reason is why I thought this would be an interesting bit for me to review and see how the internet service providers are operating. So I now move to my research aim and objectives. And whereas the overall study is to examine the COVID-19 strategic responses and their influence on organization performance, I was keen to see how the influence of financial restructuring on organization performance looks like for the internet service providers. I also will be looking to determine the influence of staff restructuring and training on organization performance. And lastly, really, what is the influence of work from home on organization performance among the internet service providers? So out of my literature review, I looked out for a theoretical framework that was going to underpin my objectives, or the things that, of my hypothesis and the things that I was trying to fish out and research. The Higgins model, which focuses on 8 S's, which is the successful strategy execution, really came out as strong fit. It's an wholesome kind of model, and it captures quite a number of elements that organizations would like to look at in terms of strategic responses to ensure that their organization performance remains afloat. The first S stands for strategy, which is a critical element. The second S looks at structure. And the third S focuses on systems and processes, where the fourth S looks at the management style and the leadership style that is demonstrated by the top leaders of these organizations. The fifth S is around staff, and the sixth S is resources. And the seventh S looks after the shared values or the culture within these organizations. And the eighth S, which anchors very well my dependent variable of organizational performance, is the strategic performance. Looking at the model also, when you think about the sixth S focusing on resources and the availability of these resources, we see it also supporting the financial restructuring variable within my research topic. And the staff and the resources on the fifth S and the third S, which looks after systems and processes, also were coming out strong to underpin the work from home variable that I had picked. So therefore, the Higgins model stood out for me, and I considered this as one of the models that was underpinning my research topic. And therefore, after looking at that theoretical framework and having the confidence that even from a literature review, my topic was quite well anchored, I went ahead and came up with this conceptual framework where under financial restructuring, you'll be looking at organization focusing on budgeting, debt financing, and how new projects are being financed. Under staff restructuring and training, the focus will be around training on new technologies, staff downsizing or ensuring that you have optimal staff that's working within the organization, and telework and training. And work from home variable or independent variable was looking at the flexibility in working and how productive the teams are when they work from home. These three variables were hypothetically relating to the organizational performance, which focuses on the staff competency, the financial resources growth, and the service quality that the overall organization is delivering. And therefore, the link between the three variables and the dependent variable was presented this way in the conceptual framework. So then I went ahead to now look at my hypothesis and look at these variables that I had picked up and see how they were relating or how they really supported the organizational performance. And I went into the methodology bit, and a descriptive research approach was most preferred in this case. And I had a population of 41 internet service providers. And because this was a small population, I opted to go with the census sampling. And this was done purely on quantitative analytics, where I issued structured questionnaires to collect the primary data. And after that, I went ahead to use the SPSS, or the statistical package for social sciences software, to do my analysis. And that's how I came up with the percentages, frequencies, and means and standard deviations that were helping me to analyze and check out the correlation and all the relationship amongst these variables. For inferential statistics, I used the paired t-test model, the correlation, the multiple linear regression tests, and we will be seeing how those findings look like. So I'll start with the paired sample t-test that I did. And from the opinion of the respondents, at this point, we see the second column, which is the mean column, showing that the financial restructuring, staff restructuring, work from home, and organizational performance was more put into practice, or there's an increase of practice for these variables after COVID than it was before COVID. And if we look at, for example, the financial restructuring, before COVID, we had a mean of 2.98, and after COVID, we have a mean of 3.825. Whereas this was the opinion of the respondents, the model was going to help me to statistically then prove some of this significance. Was this significance really relevant? Was the difference really significant? And that is explained in the last column, where you see the p-value of financial restructuring is at 0.002, which is greater than the threshold of 0.05. Therefore, it shows that there is a significant difference before and after COVID-19 for the application of financial restructuring. That applies to staff restructuring with a mean of 2.93 and 3.67, and a significance of 0.01. Therefore, staff restructuring was equally more practiced after COVID than it was before COVID. We look at the work from home, also the significance is greater than 0.05, it's at 0.001, and therefore the work from home practice was applied more after COVID than it was. Based also on the opinion of the respondents, according to the mean of 2.855 for organizational performance and 3.615 after COVID for the same variable, we see that the significance difference is one that you'd say was one to check out, because then there was higher performance of these internet service providers after COVID than it was before COVID. After doing that initial analysis, I moved to test the association between the financial restructuring, staff restructuring, and training and work from home, and the organizational performance factors. At this point, I was looking for a pattern that would help me see how the movement of these independent variables were affecting the dependent variable. If we look at the correlation coefficient here, the second row, you see that under financial restructuring, you have a coefficient of 0.720, which is positive to start with, and it is greater than 0.7. So in this case, we are looking at a strong association between financial restructuring and organizational performance. Similarly, we see a positive correlation coefficient of 0.851 for staff restructuring and training after COVID, and work from home stands at 0.357, which are all positive variants. And therefore, we see that there's a strong association between these factors and organizational performance. The fact that we are seeing the three variables or the three coefficients are positive, we are seeing that as the rate of these independent factors goes up, then you see a change in the organizational performance. Therefore, financial restructuring has a significant and positive association on organizational performance among the internet service providers, and staff restructuring and training have a positive, significant association on organizational performance among the internet service providers in Kenya. And lastly, we also find that working from home has a significant and positive association with organizational performance among internet service providers. I went ahead to look at how these independent factors, or the three variables that I was working with, contribute, or how they relate to the organizational performance. And
3 minutes left.
This regression analysis has an R-square of 0.786, which translates to a 78.6% of the organizational performance being explained by these three factors. So we are looking to explain the variation of the organizational performance considering these three variables, which is staff restructuring, work from home, and staff restructuring and training. So in this case, we see that most of the variations in organizational performance is explained by these three variables. Like I said at the very beginning, is the fact that there are many strategic factors. So the remaining could actually be explained by the other factors, but this remained a very significant percentage of the organizational performance being explained by the three factors that were selected. And for me, this kept on giving me the confidence that the goodness of fit of these strategic responses for explaining the organizational performance was a good selection. I will now continue to see how the model significance played around. And I was looking in this case to measure how these three independent variables worked jointly to explain the organizational performance. And if you look at the last column here, which gives a p-value of 0.000, that is above the threshold of 0.05. And this then tells us that this model is quite significant. This means that the model where COVID-19 strategic responses predicted the organizational performance was a strong model, and it shows that there's a good joint collaboration, so to say, amongst the three independent variables, which is,
You have less than 1 minute left. If I can ask you to wrap it up, thank you.
Okay, so in this case, we'll try and wrap it up with the strength and direction. Also looking at the second column here, you see positive beta variance of 0.38, 0.73, 0.35 for the three factors, which tells us that there is the three factors are strong in explaining. That means if you're to invest in these three strategies, you will gain value of the investment. They are equally quite significant in the way they affect that performance. And at this point, I'll look to conclude the study. And we see that the financial restructuring strategies were emphasized more after COVID-19, and that applies to the staff restructuring and work from home after COVID-19. That is explained from the paired t-tests that we have just run through. We also see that there was a rise in COVID-19 response strategies, which were associated with the rise in organizational performance, and that is explained in the correlation results. We see also from the regression results that the relationship between financial restructuring, staff restructuring and training, and work from home strategies was positive and significant. So if we look at the last model, is to say that staff restructuring and training has the strongest impact on organizational performance. At this point, I'll look at the recommendations of the study, and I'll look at it in three buckets where we would be looking to recommend to the management of these organizations that if they were to look at the study and the findings of this study, then they will be prioritizing staff restructuring and training over the other strategies. And this will also be backed up by really the budget constraints and all, but if they were to consider, then they would have to follow the rest after the staff restructuring and training. Recommendations for policy bodies, you'd have like the Ministry of Labor considering to check on the laws of work from home or laws on deferring debts for especially the small and medium enterprise, and recommendations for theory building. Scholars of this strategy may use findings of this study to further their research. And the Higgins theory, which was the theoretical theory that I banked on, was found to be applicable in this study, and this advances its application. There are limitations that came up or I found in this study. The fact that I focused on internet service providers only provides a future opportunity for people to consider other areas or other industries and look at the effects of COVID-19 in a general manner. The research methods that I used also were largely quantitative, and therefore further studies could consider using qualitative research. And the fact that I also limited the study to 41 internet service providers and only, had the HR managers respond provides an opportunity for other scholars to then either increase the population and also check on increasing the respondents to include operations manager, finance managers, department heads, and generalize the study findings. Thank you very much. And that brings me to the end of my study. Thank you.
Thank you, Trinta. So now I would like to invite the questions for you. I would first like to invite Enrique to start by posing some questions about your thesis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vera. Congratulations, Trinta, for such a great work and for having done such a great effort to start with. Okay. I have a couple of questions. First one would be, you employ the Higgins model, which is a good model to analyze the alienation of, or the alignment, sorry, of a strategy to the other organizational aspects of a company. But I was reading through that, and while I read your paper, your dissertation, I was missing the connection between this model and your conclusions or your study or even your research method. So my first question, I have 2 or 3 more, is how did the Higgins model help you? What, in practical terms?
Yeah, the Higgins model is quite comprehensive, and when you think about the 8 S's, the Higgins model was quite relevant, and when I looked at the 8 S's, I was able to see that most of my variables were actually anchored in this. So looking at the relevance of the S's, like the S that looked after systems and processes in an institution to implement the strategies, then my variable on work from home, which is highly supported and anchored on systems and processes, standard processes, being the enablers of staff that have to work from home, and also the 5th S, which looked at staff and the quality and quantity of staff, really seemed to anchor the variables that I had selected. Apologies for that. And also the fact that the 8th S looked at strategic performance, and that was one of the it was actually the dependent variable in my study. I thought the model was really underpinning the variables that I had selected for study.
Thank you very much. My second question would be on the prevalence of work from home. You mentioned, I think it is on page 42 of your work. Let me quickly go back to it to see. You mentioned that there is a, from your, sorry, one second. You mentioned that there is a prevalence, I'm not sure if I'm using the right word, the prevalence of work from home if we compare prior to the pandemic and after the pandemic. And I was reading the questions and I was wondering, how did you come to that conclusion? Because the questions that you asked related to work from home, none of them, from my understanding, really check whether there was a higher frequency or higher amount of people working from home, but rather it was looking into the difficulties of working from home, the psychological stress, the anxiety that it produced, the conflict between family and work, all those things. And I could understand that you could infer a higher incidence of issues rather than a higher frequency of work from home. But maybe this is a question for you, because I couldn't really understand that.
Sorry, I guess I missed you quite a bit. My network was a bit unstable.
Yes, okay. The question, I can repeat, no problem. In your, it's page 42, working from home, you mentioned the different frequencies and the mean for the study of the questions on working from home. Okay? And then as a conclusion of those questions, you say that working from home in the organization was more prevalent after the pandemic than before the pandemic. And you show the evidence of the mean being lower than afterwards as a proof of that. But if I read the questions, they actually are asking on aspects of how positive or negative was the experience of working from home, not whether working from home was more prevalent before or after. And I was wondering if I have misread your table or something that I'm missing. Thanks.
No, actually, so there's a link between the preferred work from home. So most organizations employed the work from home after the pandemic, and more so after the effects of the COVID-19. So whether this was a preferred model and in terms of work from home and how the teams adopted it was what the analysis would show from the mean, where there was more practice of work from home than after the COVID crisis than it was before. So it's correct the way you read it, and I think it's the relation between the preference of work from home after COVID and how organizations adopted it and made it an option compared to having to go to the office and applying all the COVID protocols. Yeah. So it's correct the way you read it, and it's the inferring of the preferred or the preference of this after COVID-19 than it was before COVID-19.
Thank you very much. My last question would be then, on the last of the tables where you are referring to organizational performance and you are asking a number of questions to the, I guess you selected the random person in the organization, so the human resources person, I'm not too sure. You ask a number of questions which are more or less subjective, like, for example, was the financial performance better, or things such as that. Why didn't you choose objective measures of performance rather than subjective questions? What was the reason why you chose subjective questions as opposed to asking, for example, for the P&L results or the sales results or things like
that? This was quite linked to also the target respondents. When I was selecting the respondent for this questionnaire and settling on the HR as opposed to the finance managers and all, I wanted to have a unified kind of response that would address the three variables without necessarily having to expand the respondents. And I mentioned that was one of the limitations of the study, where the HR person was giving this. So the reason is why I structured the questions like this was to allow the HR practitioner to be able to respond without having to think and look for numbers. And this cites really an opportunity to even do a proper study into the future, where you then incorporate and even have specific figures or revenue numbers that demonstrate or confirm this shift in the organizational performance after COVID and before.
Thank you very much. Those were all my questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I would like to now invite Inge's questions.
Sure. Thank you, Vera, and thank you, Trinta, for your presentation here today. It's good to hear from you. My first question is a little bit along the lines of what Enrique was just addressing in terms of the data collection, the survey here you've used, because the main focus that you wanted to figure out.
Inge, you accidentally muted yourself.
Yep, I saw that. I got a message. I'll just take the question again. It's related to what Enrique just said about the survey instrument that you have used, because your focus in the thesis is to look at the change that has happened both in organizational performance and in these three strategic responses. And what I would like to ask you is how you have captured the before results and the after results with this survey. I'm not quite sure how you've done this. So could you elaborate a little bit on this?
Yes, so the questions that were sent out in the questionnaire, or the questions that are incorporated, included a response of similar questions before and after COVID. So I would ask, for example, the firm conducts regular budgeting depending on the economy and financial situation. And this was split into two, so that was before and after. And based on this and running this through the software, then
I can't hear Trinta anymore.
No, I lost her too.
Okay, let's give her a moment.
Yeah.
I'm sure she'll rejoin us in a moment.
There she is again. Trinta, you back? We can't hear you. You're muted, Trinta. You're muted.
Sorry. Yes, I'm back. I just realized that I was tethering on my phone. I just realized that that connection was unstable, so I just have switched now to Wi-Fi. I hope this will be stable. Apologies for that. Maybe I could respond once again to the question so that we pick it from where it was. So the responses, or rather the question structure that I sent out in the questionnaire incorporated similar questions, and this was split into two. So the respondents would actually respond to that practice or that question before and after the COVID-19. And that's what I was explaining, that running this from through the software, we were able to then pick up the variation of this same question before and after, and come up with the analysis and findings as I have presented them.
Thank you. So just to be clear, they answered the same questions twice.
Yes. So it was, yes, it was before and after. That was the structure. And when I sent this on Google Forms to the respondents, I was actually giving a brief to the respondents to ensure that they capture and understand the questions as they were presented. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Then I have just another more broad question about the method, because I would like you to just give a brief, let's say, justification for why you chose, let's say, this quantitative method of using a survey to get to respondents instead of maybe doing some interviews with some of these people. What was your rationale for choosing this particular method?
So my rationale was, number one, fact that I was inviting, at least I was looking to get one response from each of these organizations based on the population. The qualitative method really was going to give me a quick descriptive kind of analysis from the responses. And that's why we see the mean already pointing towards some of the hypotheses, answers that I was looking for. And the qualitative method really also remains quite cost effective. And given the time and the diverse location of these as internet service providers, I opted to go for the quantitative method because it's cost effective. And it was one that was also going to enable me to then analyze using the software and come up with this. So the cost bit, I must say, was one of the driving factor. And I then had to structure the questions in a way that with the software, I gained not the depth per se, but I gained the kind of an analysis that would help explain the situation better. So it was one, the choice of respondents and the cost element, and the quantitative method really stood out for me.
Okay, thank you. Then last question, I think I have the chance to do one more that I will center maybe around the theoretical conceptual framework that you have, also a little bit related to Enrique's question. Because you have on the one side, you have the strategic responses that you have chosen 3. And on the other side, you have the organizational performance where you also chose 3 variables. I would like it if you could give us an account of how and why you chose those particular responses, the financial restructuring and the staff restructuring and training and the work from home as the responses, and also the dependent variable of the organizational performance, why you chose those particular variables.
Yeah, so the effect and really this was quite anchored on my motivation for this study, where I was looking at the effects of COVID-19. So some of the key and glaring things that happened after COVID-19 were the fact that the behavior of how employees and individuals operated was shifting. We also saw supply chains get broken, and therefore most organizations went into financial distress. And looking at the staff training and restructuring, it was also a common thing that was happening across most organizations. So looking at the Higgins model and how some of the variables would play along, I looked at those variables that were really most relevant for the season to start with and for the crisis that we were working on. The financial performance was of interest also as a variable because most organizations did not even survive the effects of COVID-19. Some were shut down and all of this. So the Higgins model gave me an opportunity to really review and see, based on my topic and based on the things that I wanted to study, how these were playing together. So I looked for the most relevant, and for sure, I think the findings really confirmed that the variables that I chose were the most strong variables to explain the study that I was undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Trinta.
Thank you very much. Is there an additional round of questions that you still have for Trinta? Otherwise, I would like to now move on to the examination part where Inge and Enrique will get to discuss the grade boundary, whether any corrections are to be made, major or minor, or whether there is a fail or not. Shall we proceed to this stage now? Okay. So, Kubra, if I can have your support to just...
Susan here. I'm opening the breakout room now.
Sorry?
It's Susan here. I'll be opening the breakout room now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much to Inge and Enrique for deliberating on the final outcome of this MBA thesis defense. I would now like to first invite Inge to tell Trinta about the outcome, and then also Enrique to provide further feedback for this outcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vida. So we have deliberated in the committee, and Trinta, I am glad to tell you that the thesis is passed. We have, however, some major revisions that you have to make, and Ricky will go through that in just a moment. But the most important thing is that it's a pass with the thesis that we give you. You've put a lot of effort and work into it, but there are some revisions that you will have to take into consideration, and then we will go through some of those revisions that we have discussed with you now.
Thank you, Inge. Thank you, Vera. Congratulations, Trinta. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now you can breathe and relax.
Yeah.
Everything we're going to tell you now is, of course, in the constructive tone. Okay. Yeah. So first of all, we have both Inge and I have appreciated very much the amount of effort that you have put into the work. We think it was well written with a good style, that it had a good literature review section with a good relevant and quite a multitude of sources mentioned, and you've done an exhaustive work in that sense for this type of exercise, so we congratulations for that. When it comes to the actual methodological or the method of the theory applied, we find, both Inge and I, that the use of Higgins model, which is quite a useful model, it's been slightly superficial in the sense that we see that you use it, you explain it well, you know what it means, you have a good understanding of the model, but we haven't really seen that model was actually driving the work of your thesis. And we feel there was a slight disconnect in that sense. Okay, that would be like the first big item that required some feedback from our side. Then, when it comes to the actual methodology used to your research, we found that there were some flaws in the logic, starting with aspects such as the one that I mentioned in one of my questions, about the difference between prevalence of work from home versus the number of issues or the problems created by work from home, and that was a fundamental flaw that has put at risk your thesis, because it was, to us, it was quite a big flaw. Okay. We also see that the inference of saying that the three factors that you have used in particular are those that represent a cause and effect relationship with the performance, especially given the fact that performance has not been evaluated in objective matters rather than rather subjective ones. We believe it's probably too risky to come to those conclusions, that they're not sufficiently proven, and that in a different context it probably wouldn't have been accepted as a proof of evidence of your statements. Okay. I think that's in a nutshell what we have been discussing. Please, Inge, correct me if I misinterpreted something or if I missed something. And in general, we believe it's a good job, but there are quite significant flaws that need to be addressed. Sorry, Inge, maybe you want to complement what I just said.
No, as Vera commented also in the deliberation room, and again, we are quite aligned in pointing to that, and that's also the questions we had for you in the defense showed that we were centering on the theoretical aspects and the connection to your research questions and your objective on the one side, and then on the other side, how you you gathered your data to answer that question. So it's both on the theoretical side and the methodological side that needs to be somehow better aligned. Good.
All right. So in that sense, I would just like to warmly congratulate you, Trinta, and I would like to thank you, Enrique, for being the external examiner, and then of course also Inge for your hard work as a supervisor. And therewith, I would like to now draw a conclusion to this defense. I hope you have a wonderful time celebrating, Trinta, and congratulations again on your achievement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, everyone.